Oh, blow, here we go. I thought, oh, I've got it back again now. This is a story called Goliath and the Work Experience Girl. Now, Ruth and I were talking about this at lunchtime today, and I thought, well, I've never written this story, and perhaps I ought to. So now I've got it, actually, I've managed to get it on the screen next to me, so it's just, I'm going to just move it over a little bit, covering up my face, and I'm like reading off a teleprompter, if you like. Now I've written it down as a script because I don't want to miss any of the details out. So here we go, see how I go. Right, Goliath and the Work Experience Girl. It must have been around 1994, as following the beginning of the National Lottery, we were fearfully in debt, and visitor numbers had taken an enormous tumble. All the previous regular paid workers had been let go, and Ruth and I were doing the daily work of cleaning out 15 heavy horses on our own. Ruth helped me for an hour or so every morning from about 7 after the horses had finished their breakfast. By 8:30 she was on her way to visit her first district nursing clients. Ruth, as you gather, was our wage earner. This particular day Goliath had fallen again, and I found him in a similar place to where he was when we actually had to call out the firemen not long afterwards. He was fairly close to a large post, and I asked Ruth to give me a hand. If we caught him relatively quickly after he had fallen, he still had sufficient energy to help us to get him up. As I've explained in previous stories, Goliath had bad arthritis in his back leg joints. Although he was only 13 or 14 years old, he'd not had a good early life, and this had taken its toll. His back legs would not bend, so getting up off the floor was impossible for him on his own. We normally put a head collar on him quickly and gave... Oh, I'm winding it up, it's working. We normally put a head collar on him quickly and gave him a pull with as many strong folk as we could get hold of. This and packing straw bales under his shoulders normally did the job in those early years. And we had to resort to a crane later, see or watch or listen to the big one, the story of when the fireman came one night to help get him back on his feet. Back to this morning with Ruth and myself. Ruth found his head collar and began talking to Goliath and explaining what she wanted him to do. He was a pretty intelligent horse. He was very good with trying to help, but on this day he overdid it. As Ruth was putting the head collar over his nose, Goliath decided to help even more than usual and lifted his head quickly, clattering Ruth across the bridge of her nose. Goliath, remember, at this time was the Guinness tallest horse in the whole world. He was big, very big, and his head was probably half the size of the whole of Ruth's body. She was only 5 foot tall and pretty slim. The effect was dramatic. Ruth was pushed over onto the ground and blood began cascading from her nose like a fountain out of control. Goliath was very upset too, and I had to calm him as I helped Ruth to the house and asked if she needed an ambulance. I could not see what he had done, only the trail of blood and blood all over her clothes. Ruth told me I could stuff the ambulance where a monkey puts his nuts and disappeared into the house to get herself repaired, change into her uniform and ready to face her numerous clients within the next half an hour. It was into all this turmoil that a young lady appeared together with her mother. The girl was perhaps 14 years old and from one of the local schools. We had work experienced children at the horse centre regularly on planned work programmes. I'd forgotten that this one was due. They'd parked on the road just outside the stable yard and come in through the road gate at the very moment that Goliath clouted Ruth on the nose. They could see an enormous horse scrabbling around on his side on the ground in some distress. They could see me trying to help Ruth, who had a fountain of blood cascading from her nose, and me trying to help in some way. As I was about to follow Ruth to the house and assist in any way I could, they made themselves known. I'd not noticed them being there previously, as the commotion was mind-numbing. The young girl could not comprehend what she was seeing. I explained what had happened and what still needed to be done to get Ruth off to work and Goliath back on his feet. They turned tail and literally ran out of the yard. It was a madhouse, or mad something, and was too much for them to cope with. Ruth did eventually get herself cleaned up, and with the help of ice and paracetamol and arnica tablets, managed to get herself off to work. Needless to say, her face was black and blued for days afterwards. I did manage to get Goliath up that time by tying an extra rope part way up that heavy pole next to him and threading his head collar rope through that. This was the last time I could manage him on my own, and the fireman at 3 a.m. episode happened quite soon afterwards. So there we are. Now then, I'm just going to get rid of this teleprompter. There we are. Now I'm here now with this arm. Here we are. So if you like that, now that's typical of what happened at the horse centre. Yeah, when you look after 15 big horses, and most of them were there for their health, because they weren't healthy, they wanted help with their health, or we had one or two that were pretty good and pretty healthy, and it was their owners that were unhealthy, and they were there because the owners couldn't look after them, and so that's how we came across all these animals that we had at that time. Yeah, very memorable. So now, if you enjoyed the story, please give us a like and think about subscribing to the channel, and share the story to your mates. If you like it, share it to your mates and then send it around the world. Okay. And then link coming up here for the other publications from Cracker Books. There's 10. There is a Goliath storybook, by the way. You ought to see that. Now I reckon I'm going to put it on here when I do this edit. Put Goliath storybook on here, then you can download it and look at it. It's a super picture storybook, all about his life. So there we are. Thanks for being with us today, and for the moment, cheerio.